It's a very striking headline when we read that you wrote that you almost carried out a mass shooting in your hometown of Denver, Colorado. How on earth had you got to the point, Aaron, where you felt like that was what you wanted to do?
I had grown up being really depressed and abused in a really violent and chaotic family and household. And I finally got to the point where I was feeling really suicidal and felt like I was going to hit the bottom, and I reached out for help. I tried twice to go to social services, and I was not only turned away, but they ended up being some of the most negative times of my entire life. And I ended up just snapping. I ran into that darkness and just used it as a shield and as a weapon.
But why was it, Aaron? I mean, this is the extraordinary thing. In the light of these more mass shootings that we're seeing over the weekend, why was it that you wanted it to be such a violent outcome? Well, that was the only thing that you felt like was going to give you a sense, I don't know, was it going to give you a sense of relief from the pain that you were in?
My personal story was that I felt like I wasn't being heard at all. I felt like I wasn't being listened to, and I was going to scream out so everybody would be forced to listen to me. And I see a real strong similarity, especially with the shooter just recently in El Paso. In his manifesto, he talks about wanting to be some kind of hero against the invading horde.
This point of getting attention is a really interesting one, isn't it? We had Tom Tevez, who lost his son Alex in the Aurora theatre shooting, on the show yesterday, and he was talking about media outlets banning, naming these shooters. Would you be in favour of that?
I absolutely would. I think that the seeking attention it's a weird thing. I personally wasn't going for attention, like getting notoriety or getting anybody to notice me on the news or anything like that. I wanted personally to make my own family pay by making a monster. So when people say that that's attention seeking, sometimes that can be too general of a label for what the actual problem is. And I think that's part of the basic problem that we're facing all the way around, is that we have these generalized labels that we think of when we think of someone who might be a shooter. We have this image that comes in our head. And frankly, if you think that there's a stereotype for what a shooter can be, then that is a problem, because there really isn't one. The only thing that there is pain, and people who are feeling this pain and anger to the point where they feel they need to express it in such terrible and destructive ways.
So you wanted your family to notice. Have you spoken to them about that since? I mean, how did they react?
They didn't know at the time, and since I came out with my story, my mom and my direct family, they're upset that I'm bringing family business out into the light, so they're mad about it. But the people who were there with me that saw what was going on, they're fully in support. Even some of the kids who would have been my victims at the high school are actually now close friends of mine, and help me on this journey of trying to talk about mental health. Even a couple of the bullies who I talk about explicitly in my TED Talk, they came out publicly and apologized in the comments of that very video.
The TED Talk would recommend anybody go and watch, because it is extraordinary, Aaron. Hearing you talk so openly and honestly about what you went through. You mentioned a stereotype. You said the problem is if there's a stereotype, we already have a problem. And it seems to be young white men, late teens, early 20s, who are disillusioned with the environment that they're in. They're striking back about the environment that they're in, the schoolmates that they have, the family life that they've grown up in. And we already have that. It does seem to be a type, doesn't there?
I think, yeah, there's a type for the expression, but I think the problem is when we think that everybody fits into certain types. I think that right now, yeah, there's a definite problem with young, angry white males in particular thinking and feeling inadequate and thinking that they need to lash out. A good way to explain it, in my opinion, is when I was growing up and I was bouncing from school to school, I would get bullied a lot. And if I went to a certain school and if I were getting bullied, I might have one kid that would bully me. He might have 4 or 5 friends that would also bully me. But on the opposite side, I might have 4 or 5 kids that would be on my side that would try to protect me. But now in the age of social media, if someone is trying to be a bully or a troll, they have a whole subgroup that's cheering them on and giving them tips on how to do it better, and then giving them what basically is an award for being the best troll. And I think that causes people who are searching for that positive reinforcement and that validation that they matter, they end up finding it in the most negative and destructive possible places.
So do you agree with Donald Trump?
Being the worst person.
So do you agree with Donald Trump, what he was saying yesterday? He said we have a real problem with the internet, we have a real problem with mental health, we have a real problem with the internet for breeding these environments where this can happen.
I think the internet, yes, although I do have to take one point that has been bandied about in the media. Video games are not part of the problem. Video games are not a factor in that. It's the troll culture that might use games as a medium, but it's the troll culture that's doing it. It's not the games itself. It's the 8chan and the 4chan and the message boards and the constant negative reinforcements and giving tips on how to be better at being mean and be better at insulting people. Like we used to tell our children growing up to pay attention to the internet because if they were flirting with somebody, that girl you're flirting with might be a 40-year-old man sitting in his basement. We seem to have forgotten that as adults. And the person that we're debating with politics on the internet might not be an adult. That might be a kid who's just trying to make you mad because he knows he can. And I think that we have lost perspective on what the social media aspect really is going on.
Here in the UK, we find it quite hard to get our head around this. We hear about these shootings every other day. There's something. There's a mass shooting, and it's just really hard to comprehend. Just because we don't have guns so readily available here, and that seems like the obvious thing to do. Just get rid of the guns. I mean, what do the authorities need to do from your perspective? It's a bigger thing than just the guns, but they're at the heart of it, aren't they?
I don't think that getting away all the guns is at all even feasible or realistic, but I do think that there has to be realistic and common sense measures put in place to prevent someone who is in the position that I was in 25 years ago from getting a rifle. If you're driving a car, you have to have a license, you have to be trained, you have to have insurance, and at any time driving that car, if you mess up and break a law, that license can be taken away and your right to drive that car can be removed. I don't see why we can't have a similar system in place for the most dangerous weapon we can possess.
You said we just had a little clip of your TED Talk, and you said you found your light, Aaron. Just tell us a little bit about life now for you, because there's a dramatic shift, isn't there, from the young, angry young man you were to the fine, upstanding father that you are now.
Absolutely. I'm a happy father of 4. I tell everybody that my prize achievement in my whole life is that my 18-year-old daughter tells everybody I'm her best friend. And I am still the person I talk about who saved my life in my talk. He's still the closest friend in my life. In fact, I'm going to go see a concert with him tomorrow night. I spent most of my life thinking that I was the bad person and thinking that I was a monster and thinking that all of my history was going to be a negative that was going to hold me down. And if anybody ever found out who I was, they would hate me. And just by talking about the true reality of the pain that I went through has made me see that I actually am worth it and that I haven't been alone this whole time. And it's given me a purpose in life that I never had before.
Well, it's a purpose that is striking.
Light is definitely a good way to explain it.
Yeah, it's beaming from you, Aaron. We can see that all the way over the other side of the Atlantic. Can't thank you enough for joining us this morning and sharing your story as well. It really is a treat to see you. And as we said, do go and try and find Aaron Stark's TED Talk, because it's an absolutely fascinating story. Thank you for joining us this morning, Aaron.
Thank you very much. Please, just everybody, try to show love to the ones you think deserve it the least because they need it the most. Thank you.